Hey everyone, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be the Game Week 31 team selection. And I've actually just started to record right after watching the Real Madrid versus Chelsea game. Now, of course, Real Madrid won 2-0 at the Bernabeu, but the most beautiful thing about that game is it actually made me convinced to actually start Steele over Kepa. So from my last transfer plan video, you'll notice, of course, that one of the transfers that I suggested is incorporated because I have Trent in my team, but also that I've changed my keeper. I've gone from Kepa to Steele because I'm no longer really confident in Chelsea even being able to get that clean sheet versus Brighton. Not to mention that I'm quite comfortably going to play these Brighton assets, and I'm quite convinced as well, just based on the football that we've watched thus far, and of course the two in isolation Chelsea performances under Frank Lampard, that I'm not really going to get much from this Chelsea team, and therefore Steele will play ahead of Kepa for me. As far as Trippier and Zinchenko, these were obvious assets that we want to play this week. Zinchenko for the reason that West Ham will still have a European game to play. They probably will still play a relatively strong XI, and I don't even think West Ham, for example, will be particularly looking for a result versus Arsenal. Now, Arsenal have been actually very good at away from home at getting clean sheets, so I'm hoping that Zinchenko will finally get me a clean sheet for now, and that I will be rewarded for going out of a Brentford asset as opposed to an Arsenal asset a few weeks previous. So that's going to be why Zinchenko plays. You'll also notice that Shaw and Botman are on the bench. This isn't a lovely fixture for Newcastle, in my opinion, just because Aston Villa have been quite consistent in being able to at least score 1 to 2 goals per match very consistently. The XG tally for Aston Villa has been quite strong. Whilst obviously Newcastle remains as one of the top defenses, I still think they're capable of conceding, particularly away from home. They're much better from home. As far as Shaw, of course, I don't really know whether he's going to even feature in that game. And it seems like the indication might be that he could make it for the weekend, but he might not be fully fit. So I don't really see why Erik ten Hag would risk him unless he's called upon, let's say, and he's needed in the last 15 minutes for whatever reason to salvage a game versus Nottingham Forest. But I don't think that's going to be the case. So I'm going to play it safe with Shaw and put him on my bench because I've also gone for this -4, which includes going for Trent in my team, and that's actually left 0.0 million in the bank. Why have I gone for Trent? The simple reason, of course, is that Leeds away from home is not actually a very good fixture, but I still think that Trent in this fixture is better than Chilwell, for example, at home versus Brighton, where I really can't see Chelsea keeping a clean sheet there. They also played in Europe too, so whatever reasons you might have that teams would be leggy or whatever, that's going to carry over. But I still think that even if, let's say, you take all these mental mass out of the way, Chelsea have been frankly diabolical under Lampard, and I really don't see much different when it comes to Brighton coming and hopefully actually, of course, wanting revenge after what happened in the Tottenham game. As far as Trent, though, when we talk about the offensive point of view, I just really love once again, the offense from Trent in the Arsenal game. He looked pretty much terrible once again on defense, but that's not why we have Trent as a defensive asset in FPL. We pick him because he can contribute so much on the offensive end, and that's what really brings him the points. So I'm hoping that Trent will be able to do well versus a Leeds side that actually, in my opinion, have, whilst being able to get results and actually get points on the board, haven't looked particularly good. And you saw that with the decimation versus Crystal Palace in the previous week, actually at home as well. So that's my concern there with Leeds. As far as moving into the midfield, you can see that I've taken a -4 in for someone like Jack Grealish. Grealish was the make weight for Madison, or rather Madison was the make weight for Grealish, which allowed for Trent, and therefore Grealish is the transfer that I went with because I was thinking exclusively about 31 and 33 in mind. I have a situation now where Rashford is sitting on my bench, so the question is, on game week 34, when a lot of us will be looking to, let's say, drop Kane from our teams for 1 week at least, and to go into Salah if we want to do that double transfer. And if I was to roll on 33 after coming out of the 32 free hit, then it actually makes sense for me to go out of either Rashford or Grealish. Rashford, of course, if the injury news is still negative, and Grealish if the injury news for Rashford is positive. So these two players will probably be my make weight for Salah in Game Week 34, and I'll illustrate that in my Game Week 34 strategy section later. As far as McAllister and Mitoma, these are two assets that I will be starting for the foreseeable future, especially looking at, let's say, McAllister, who I put on the bench last week, and looking at the highlights of the Brighton game and just rewatching it as well. It was the wrong decision. And these Brighton assets, even including March, for example, seem like assets that you want to play on a week-to-week basis. I really can't see any reason not to play them and not to start them. And the Rashford injury actually gives us a perfect situation, really, to allow us to do that, because we can now play a 3-4-3 every week, or at least some form of 4-4-2. If, let's say, we don't really want to play one of the forwards, such as the person in the Watkins position. And that would probably be the case in Game Week 34. For now, though, of course, when we look at the team, Fernandes is a great game versus Nottingham Forest. Hopefully, we'll play a little bit more higher up the field. He did look exquisite versus Everton as well. I would say a little bit unfortunate to not get an assist or two in that game. And as I said, with McTominay and McAllister, two fantastic assets that look consistently good. And Brighton is a team where I don't think there's one main output or sort of player that actually benefits from the overall team XG creation. But the reality is McTominay and McAllister are heavily involved in all their attacks. And McAllister, of course, is the penalty taker. So that's a huge positive when he actually gets given penalties fairly by referees. As far as Grealish, though, the reason why he comes into the team is because he's cheaper than the other City assets. So therefore, he actually allowed for this really high upside hit, which is to go to Trent this week. A little bit faster and a little bit earlier in terms of the scheduling, because I think a lot of people will be thinking about going for Trent in Game Week 34, where he once again will probably look like a fantastic asset. But I still like Liverpool's fixtures heading towards there, and I didn't really want to break up Kane in my team for now until Game Week 34. So Trent for me is that sort of stopgap where I get Liverpool a week earlier, and I still really like the look of my team with Grealish in it because he probably will get a lot of nailed minutes. We have the Foden injury situation where he's still taking some time to actually recover from appendicitis, I believe. And based on Pep Guardiola's time frame, he said from the 31st of March that there would be a 2 to 3 week recovery window suggested by the doctors. And that's not even really Foden actually going back to starting. So that's probably going to be Foden going back to training for a week, maybe even 2 weeks, and then getting reintegrated into the team, having a bench appearance before actually starting again. So I don't really see the risk with Grealish here on Game Week 31 and particularly Game Week 33. When you look at Grealish as a short-term transfer, if let's say Rashford is fully fit by Game Week 34 and I'm going to transfer Grealish out to Salah, you now look at, let's say, Grealish versus Martinelli versus Odegaard. One of these transfers in this week for your team on Game Week 31 will have to be looking at Game Week 31 and Game Week 33 in isolation. And in my opinion, because Grealish has such a great game on 31, just like the Arsenal assets do versus West Ham away from home, I still think it comes back down to the game at the Etihad, where City would also once again be, in my mind, favored versus Arsenal, and I do think Grealish would have better chances to score there in that game, particularly when we actually cast our minds back to the previous game where Arsenal were playing City at home. Once Ake was actually locked into that left-back position and Bernardo was shifted back into the right wing, we saw that City were actually able to pretty much clamp down this Arsenal team. So I'm expecting much of the same at the Etihad and potentially an even more dominant performance from the City team that looked fantastic with no faults really. As far as the forward positions, I'm going for Erling Haaland, Kane and Watkins. This is the tried and trusted front line that a lot of template teams have, and the captaincy has to be slammed on Haaland. I think he's on exquisite form. Leicester have looked terrible as of late, whereas Bournemouth, for example, are once again another fantastic fixture for Kane, but you have to look at the chances Kane gets within the Tottenham team. It hasn't actually stopped him from scoring as many goals as he had this season, but ultimately Haaland still has scored more because the service for City is that much better. And ultimately, I think Bournemouth have actually looked better than Leicester, and that would actually bear out in recent weeks when you look at the expected goals conceded, particularly at home, and also even in terms of the chance creation from Leicester and that sort of point of view. So I would also recommend, if you're looking at City assets this week and you don't really want to go for a midfielder, to also think about maybe a defensive player, because that could be interesting, particularly in a week where we might not be able to play Shaw, and that Chilwell doesn't look like a particularly interesting asset, I suppose, to keep in our teams, even though he has a good home fixture on paper, which really isn't a good fixture on paper for me at all. It's just a home fixture. As far as my team, though, and my actual strategies this week, you'll see here that I've gone for using FPL team to illustrate how I'm going to plan out my team for the next few game weeks. Keep in mind, though, of course, in Game Week 31, that it's going to be exactly the same as I illustrated before in terms of the team selection. So if we move towards Game Week 32, I have actually no changes here because I'm going to be free hitting on this week. So I don't have a free hit template that I've actually reached yet. I really feel like there's no point looking at free hit templates, particularly when there's going to be things that will change heading towards Game Week 32. So inevitably our templates will change. But if we go to Game Week 33, I'm going to be rolling here, keeping once again these United assets on the bench, keeping Zinchenko on the bench because I'm not really expecting much for Arsenal in this game, and therefore quite happy to not own Arsenal assets in this fixture, whereas I have Grealish and Haaland versus Arsenal that I think will be a little bit better than, let's say, keeping Arsenal offense in this game. And then on Game Week 34, because I rolled a free transfer on Game Week 33, I would therefore have 2 free transfers, and I would use those 2 free transfers to actually go into Salah from Kane. So therefore, Kane to Vinicius will be my transfer. I'll have another double game weeker there. Terrible fixtures for Vinicius. He's playing City at home and then Liverpool away from home. two terrible fixtures, as I said, but still probably 4 appearance points for a striker, if we're being honest here, because of the Mitrovic suspension. And then Salah is why we're really making and forcing transfers here without taking a hit, because we took a hit way earlier in this window by taking a hit this week in Game Week 31. So going for Salah and 34 is my plan. The alternative, if let's say I'm forced to make an additional transfer because of whatever injury situations exist, will hopefully be alleviated by the fact that I have Rashford. So Rashford maybe to Salah would make sense if his injury situation worsens. If there are other injury situations, then I might actually just do one simple transfer from Kane to Darwin and then just go from Darwin to Kane in the week after in Game Week 35. That could be another option there. But I'm hoping that there aren't no injury situations. And obviously, best case scenario, this is going to be how I'm going to lay out my team for Game Week 34 well ahead of time, with a lot of doublers here and only one single game weeker here with Trippier. And Botman on the bench was a little bit depressing, but when you look at the other fixtures of my team and the bench, it makes a lot of sense. Watkins doesn't seem like he has a good fixture. Zinchenko neither, mostly because I do think these Arsenal-Chelsea games are actually quite high scoring. And then with Kepa, this is an opportunity, of course, to bench him, because I think Arsenal will absolutely overwhelm Chelsea regardless of the result and regardless of both teams scoring. So that's going to be the Game Week 32, the 34 strategy element of the video. Thank you guys so much for watching anyways, and I hope you guys have a wonderful week ahead.